Good afternoon. I'm Brad Harris, Smithtown historian and president of the Smithtown Historical Society, and I would like to welcome you to this special edition of Historic Smithtown. I'm standing today in front of the Epenetus Smith Tavern. The tavern is one of the oldest and historically one of the most important buildings that is still standing in Smithtown. The Epenetus Smith Tavern has been moved 3 times and has occupied 4 different sites in Smithtown Branch. The tavern has been saved time and again from destruction because so much history is associated with this house. It is a history that stretches far back into the past, since the building was standing long before the American Revolution. The history of the building itself is interesting. We don't know who built the original wing of the tavern, nor do we know when it was built. Architectural historians believe that the smaller saltbox wing of the tavern was built in the 17th century, sometime around 1690. The heavy oak framing that is visible inside this portion of the tavern suggests that it was built at this time. The little saltbox house stood on the north side of Middle Country Road, west of the Presbyterian Church, and was located where Singer Lane joins Main Street. The 2-story main block of the tavern was built around 1740, when Epenetus Smith added the large wing to accommodate his family and any guest who might wish to stay the night in the inn. The addition was also built with a saltbox shape, 2 stories high in front and 1 story high in the rear. It wasn't until the late 1800s that the main section of the tavern lost its saltbox roof line and the building was made a full 2 stories in height. Epenetus Smith, a great-grandson of Richard Smith, the patriarch of Smithtown, lived in this building and operated a tavern from the time he acquired it in 1740 until the time of his death in 1803 at the age of 80. I am now sitting inside the Epenetus Smith Tavern, and I wanted to take a minute to tell you a little bit about its history. During the time of the American Revolution, the tavern was owned by Epenetus Smith, and that's why today we know it as the Epenetus Smith Tavern. He was an innkeeper here in Smithtown for 50 years, and he was a very important man in town, not only because he was the innkeeper, but because he was a patriot. He was involved in the militia, and he ran this tavern right during the period of time when the British occupied the entire island. That happened after the Battle of Long Island in 1776, which the British won and then proceeded to evict all the patriots who were on the island. Epenetus Smith could have gone to Connecticut just as other individuals did when that disaster occurred, but he chose to stay here in Smithtown and operate his business. He didn't want to lose everything that he had invested. So he was here in town throughout the war. When the British controlled Long Island, one of the things they did was they used Long Island men who were loyal to the British Crown and therefore called loyalists. The British used them to serve as the occupying army, which meant that when they needed something from Long Island, which was an excellent base of supply for the British Army, they simply sent the loyalist soldiers out to requisition it, which meant they would visit a tavern keeper like Epenetus Smith, an avowed patriot who had a very well-stocked larder. Anything they needed, they came to a man like Epenetus Smith and took. One of the things that Epenetus Smith did was he kept a ledger of everything that the British took from him. And in one day's time, on November 21st, 1777, the British absconded with all of this stuff. According to his ledger, they took 48 sheep that weighed 40 pounds apiece. It took 5 cattle that weighed 200 pounds apiece. It took 40 gallons of rum. They took 1,838 feet of boards, probably off his barns. It took 16 turkeys, 3 geese, 30 chickens, 4 axes, a grinding stone and a crank, a barrel, all kinds of things. And you can only wonder what this marauding band of soldiers was doing in the tavern and who was being abused. The interesting thing about the list is that it's totaled, and it was 280 pounds, 6 shillings and 11 pence. And he hoped that one day he was going to be compensated for everything the British took. But that gives you an idea of what was happening to the local folk in Smithtown when the British came a-calling. They could clean you out, and you had no recourse at all. In 1976, when the nation celebrated its 200th anniversary, a historian who was then town historian for the town of Huntington, Rufus Langens, decided that it would be a good thing to see if they couldn't get the British to pay up the debts that were owed to Americans from the Revolutionary War. It was a long shot, but he gathered things like the Epenetus Smith list with all the things that were owed, and they took those lists to England. He dressed up in colonial garb. He went to Parliament, knocked on the door, and got a rather chilly reception when he told them why he was there. But he presented the bills to Parliament. I guess they were a little bit flabbergasted by it all. They said, "Thank you very much." They took the bills, and he never heard a thing from them. The building was reopened as a tavern in 1860 when Israel Whitman owned the building. Again, the tavern became the place where town meetings and court sessions were held. When Israel Whitman died, the building was sold to John S. Hunting, who decided to demolish the building to build a new house on the site. The tavern was rescued for the first time in 1911 by Mrs. Charles Addison Miller, who had it moved to the east side of Route 111. Then in the winter of 1928 and 29, the house was again moved across the road, this time to the west side of Route 111. The house continued to be rented as a 2-family home until it was sold in 1963 to Mr. and Mrs. Edward Payne. The Paynes in 1971 sold the building and property to developers who wished to build a new 3-story office building on the site. The developers that had purchased the property had no use for the building and wanted to demolish it. It looked as if the tavern was doomed. That's when an organization called the Smithtown Branch Preservation Association became interested in saving the building and sought a way to do so. The Smithtown Branch Preservation Association convinced the developers to donate the building. On Thursday, January 13th, 1972, with skies threatening rain, Davis Brothers moved the huge building a quarter of a mile north up Route 111 to the intersection with Middle Country Road, and then a quarter of a mile east along Middle Country Road to its new location adjacent to the homestead. Moving the house that half-mile took a little over an hour, but the effort required to move the building onto its new site took more than 3 hours because rain had softened the ground and the movers were forced to position planking so the house could be moved onto the site. The following day, the movers returned to position the house on its new foundation, and the Epenetus Smith Tavern had found a safe haven at last. Today, the Epenetus Smith Tavern is just one of the many buildings that occupy the 21 acres of land the Smithtown Historical Society owns off Middle Country Road in the village of the Branch. The Tavern plays an integral part in the historical programming that the Smithtown Historical Society runs for school children from all over Long Island. The living history program we offer, called The Day in the Life of an 18th Century Innkeeper, remains our most popular program because of its setting in the historic Tavern. To give you some appreciation for our living history programs, we have an opportunity to join a class in progress as it experiences a day in the life of a colonial innkeeper.
The Tavern program is to introduce to the children what it was like to travel in the 1700s. The Tavern was a place that you would come if you were traveling. Of course, today they come by bus. 1700s, they would come by stagecoach. Everybody has to get off the stage. We bring them into a room, we give them an introduction on what it was like in the 1700s. And then we bring them into a different part of the Tavern. We demonstrate activities that they do. We teach them what it was like to write a letter in the 1700s.
Not only children, but adults learn more or learn best when they can experience something, when they have a hands-on experience. So it's so much more valid when they can live it and they can see it. Just so much more authentic than sitting down in the classroom and just reading about it in a book.
We teach them about tavern sign, how most people did not read or write.
It was really fun getting the paint on it and just plopping it down, doing your own design.
We teach them about lighting, what they used for lights, candles. They get to make candles. We teach them about portraits of themselves, and we do a silhouette. So I think they learned from this program that it wasn't an easy time for people in 1700s.
We've been coming since I started teaching at William Sidney, and that's about 13 years ago. And the reason why we come here is because it so closely matches the fourth grade curriculum. We teach about the colonial times and the Revolutionary War, the 17th and 1800s.
The experience was good because I learned a lot of new stuff that I didn't know. I learned how to make candles. I learned that the British soldiers would eat first, then the adults, then the kids.
I like the physical activities because we got to make clay to fit the candles, and we got to get our shadow portrait taken by the guide who's tracing us.
What it does is it matches what they're learning about in the classroom, and it just brings what the teachers are teaching to life for them, and it helps them kind of identify with what life was like back then, and what their daily lives were like, and how it's so different from how we live today.
I think I'd probably like it because they have a lot of fun games, and I like sewing and stuff, and planting and playing with animals.
I wouldn't like it. I'd rather live here because there's more things invented.
They had to do things different, and because they don't have all technology and anything, and they don't have a lot of games. I would not like to live in the time period because everything was a lot harder.
I love to see their faces when they go, oh, and they're excited that that's how people used to do it. You know, there are some things that they could still do today. So, you know, they can go outside and they can just play. They don't have to have all this electronic stuff to keep them occupied. And I think it's nice for them to come and see that.
Because it's such a good quality program and it's so close by, it's such an incredible resource that, you know, you'd just be ashamed to not utilize it.
I hope you enjoyed our journey into the past and this look at the historic Epenetus Smith Tavern. Join me next time for more about Smithtown's fascinating history. For Historic Smithtown, I'm Brad Harris. Thank you for watching.